So you guys know that the funding of the Saudi royal family depends just as much on the price of oil as it does on the consumption of oil, right? For 7 years now, I've been loudly pointing out that the current Saudi system will be done by 2030. A standard response to this is to point out that my claim is ridiculous because Saudi Arabia will be pumping oil for the rest of the century. Well, I actually agree that oil will still be being produced in the future, but the key question isn't whether or not people are pumping it. The key question is, how much are people going to be paying for it? Every petrostate has two break-even prices. The first is the cost of production. Arabia is likely to be one of the last places on Earth that produces oil because it is one of the cheapest places to take it out of the ground. Estimates vary, but as long as oil prices are above $10 to $12 a barrel, you can still make money off of Arabian oil. Now, Saudi Arabian oil is a completely different story. It's a lot more expensive to pay for all those Saudi princes, their palaces, and their Potemkin cities like Neom. And it's even more expensive to bribe the other 35 million Saudi Arabians to keep letting the royal family do what it does. The real break-even price for the Saudi Arabian system is currently estimated to be around $75. Now, I have to give Saudi Arabia, and I guess even Crown Prince MBS, a lot of credit. They proved me wrong. Over the past 7 years, they have cut down on that break-even price enormously. With the imposition of a sales tax, a dramatic cut in the numbers of foreign workers, expanded participation of women in the workforce, and other reforms, they got the break-even price down from the low hundreds of dollars a barrel to $75. The problem is that for most of the past decade, the oil price has been well under $75. 2022 was an amazing year for oil producers. Russia, the world's third largest petrostate, turned itself into an international pariah, and prices skyrocketed. But have you noticed where the global oil and gas prices started and ended the year? It was an 11-month wonder, but oil prices are back down in the high 70s, and then they will eventually go much lower. The 2022 oil price spike gave Saudi Arabia some flexibility that it really needed to pay off some debts from the past decade, to cover up the failure of a lot of MBS's tech investments, and to dump more money into Neom for some reason.
The line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers.
But the oil price spike also destroyed an extraordinary amount of oil demand in 2022 and for all the years to come as well. Now, when I made my first lower for longer oil price prediction back in 2016, I wasn't thinking about demand at all. I was talking about supply. I thought electric vehicles were a joke back then. My expectation back then was that Saudi Arabia was screwed because oil was just available in too many places. High prices in the 2000s had sent exploration and innovation into overdrive, and the dream of the 1970s had finally been achieved. New supply from Texas to Guyana meant OPEC's pricing power was over. And whether it took a week or a decade and a half, Saudi Arabia's system was finished too. Now, what I did not expect was COVID, or the rampaging global adoption of electric vehicles. Now, please note, I am not saying that electric vehicles will replace global oil demand. They absolutely will not do that. But they don't have to end the Saudi system. They just have to lower global oil demand by like 10% or so, maybe even less. Remember how I said that oil prices were too low to meet Saudi Arabia's break-even price over most of the past 10 years? Saudi Arabia had to take on serious debt, introduce new taxes, and take insane risks like handing their country over to a 30-something. Well, all of that was just a too much oil supply issue. Every year until 2020, the world's demand for oil went up relentlessly, and the price was still too low for Saudi Arabia. In 2020, worldwide lockdowns led to a crash in demand, and the world's desire for oil has not gotten back up to those 2019 numbers since. Not in 2020 because of COVID, not in 2021 either because of Omicron, and not in 2022 either because of Chinese lockdowns and the Russia price spike. Now, the vast majority of energy analysts, including this one, believe that we have not yet reached peak oil demand and that the 2023 numbers will finally surpass the 2019 numbers. But we also thought that in 2021 and 2022, and it didn't happen. Let's take a look at what happened with the 2020 numbers again. COVID lockdowns had a massive effect on the world economy. But a surprising number of oil-related things had to keep happening. Goods had to be shipped, plastic had to be made, and the U.S., the world's biggest market, really only shut down for a month or two. So oil demand across all of 2020 fell less than 10%, and the price plummeted. People actually paid other people to take oil off their hands in March of 2020. Averaged across the year, the price was below $40 a barrel, so about half of what Saudi Arabia needs to sustain itself. Again, demand for oil went down by less than 10%, temporarily, and the average price of oil across all of 2020 fell down to less than half of what Saudi Arabia needs to support itself. The Saudi system still has the savings necessary to keep going at that low price for a year or two. And after 2022, the Saudi savings cushion is a lot bigger. But that 2022 price spike killed 2022 demand and forced a lot of countries to make some big decisions. The skeptics may be right. Electric vehicles may never replace all oil demand, even for transportation. Or if they did, it could take decades for them to do it. But how about 10% or 25%? Just 10% would represent a COVID lockdown-sized chunk taken out of world oil demand. And not temporarily, permanently. China has planned to build hundreds of nuclear power plants for a while now, but recent tensions over Taiwan have put this plan into overdrive. In 2022, a quarter of the new cars sold in China were electric. Nuclear-powered electric vehicles represent a lot of automotive fuel that will never be purchased. Thanks to 2022 price surges, on December 22nd, Japan reversed its 10-year-old anti-nuclear policy. It's reopening old plants and will build new ones. It's a little behind China on the electric cars, but it will catch up. Peak oil demand may or may not be here yet, but it's coming. Remember, prices were too low for Saudi Arabia across the 2010s when oil demand was surging. In the 2020s, demand is going to go down, or at least remain flat. Oil suppliers are now going to have to start competing for markets. The U.S. will force more and more of its allies to buy their oil and gas exclusively from the United States and Canada. Arabia will always have China, though. Even if they go 100% electric vehicles, Chinese chemical plants will need Arabian oil to turn into plastic well into the next century. Note that I do not say Saudi Arabian oil, because the price that China will pay for that oil by the end of the decade will be way too low to support a Saudi Arabia. Even at prices as low as $30 a barrel, the Arabian people can pump oil and still make amazing profits. With that kind of money, they can support massive investments in their country and probably even a reasonably generous welfare state. What they will no longer be able to support is the obscenely expensive luxury good that is the Saudi royal family. This is the endgame, folks. By 2030, Saudi Arabia as we know it is finished.
Hey everybody, just a quick programming note. I've already let the patrons know, but I want to make sure everybody else knew as well. Over the next month or so, the content's going to be coming a little more slowly, or at least the produced content, because I have finally sat down to write my next book. It's called American Empire, The First 100 Years. I've been outlining this thing for like 3 years now. I've been doing a ton of research, and now it's time to finally sit down and get to some serious writing. I'm experimenting with it. With the last book, I spent 2 years trying to write the book because I was also killing myself to get produced videos out every week. That's not what I'm going to be doing with this process. My intention is to have this book done and published this year, so I'm going to go a little more slowly with the produced content. I might even end up taking a month or two off. Not entirely certain. At this point, I'm able to both write scripts and write the book. writing the scripts at a slower pace, of course. So I just want to let everybody know that that's what is happening. I'm pretty excited about this book, American Empire, the First 100 Years, and I can't wait to share it with you, but I've got to write it first. So that's going to mean a few fewer produced videos over the next couple months. And I hope that'll be okay with everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And have I mentioned recently that I have an email list? If I lose access to any of these platforms, it will be the only way for me to reach my audience. Please do sign up either at the link here or the link in the video description. Thanks.